Howdy folks. Today we're going to be doing an advanced setup on a American Fender Strat. The gentleman brought it in and he told me that the frets felt kind of sharp on the top, and the frets are relatively thin, but they are rounded over, kind of pointed, and gave a very sharp feel. So I'm going to round them over with a wider, I'm doing a full fret level and dress, and I'm going to round them over with a wider crowning file so that they have sort of a more rounded feel to them, and make it feel a little smoother. So we'll start with just doing a fret level, and before I even do that, I need to make sure the neck and the frets are all directly in line and the neck is very straight and flat, and I've already done that. Now I'm going to just start to run the fret file over the frets, trying to take out any frets that are a little bit high. Just remove a little bit from the top from the ones that are high. I don't really take a lot off these frets, but I'm just trying to make sure that everything is exactly at the same height. He likes his action nice and low, and so that's what we're going to be doing, is we're going to set it so the action can be quite low. I'm running all this in high speed so you don't have to watch the whole thing in real time. So to get a nice rounded, smooth feel on top of the frets, I've chosen a fret file, a large one that has a very wide radius. And what that'll do is, instead of having sort of a more pointed feel on top of each fret will feel a little more rounded. The tops of the frets will look a little more like a bus, the top of a bus, instead of it being perfectly rounded on top. There are a couple advantages of doing it this way, but the major advantage is that it'll have a nice smooth feel, and the frets, it leaves more of the fret material. I don't remove as much fret material, so that down the road, if he needs another fret level in dress, there still should be plenty of fret on there. You can see what I'm doing here is I'm looking at each fret. I look at the chatter marks, and then what I do is I run that fret file over it till I remove the lengthwise running chatter marks and put in chatter marks from this file running across the fingerboard. So that's what I look for when I'm doing this. Next up, I decided to go over this with a sanding block, a soft sanding block, just to remove anything, some of the chatter marks that are left, and also to see if the rounding was enough or if I need to dress the ends of the frets. And I came up with the opinion that I should dress the end of each fret to make it feel even smoother. They were a little sharp on the ends, so I used a fret file that I use to round over the ends of the frets and make it feel nice and smooth as you run your hand up and down the fingerboard. Next up, it's time to sand and file the frets, make them nice and smooth. I start with a soft sanding block, with a very fine grit, to remove any file chatter marks that are left from the files. The files will often leave sort of a very rough feel, so I need to get that down to a glassy, smooth feel. And you can see here I'm checking sort of if there are any ends that are still a little rough, and I run my fingers along there and just see if I can find a little rough edge. And you can see I very carefully go over each fret and check for any kind of little roughness anywhere. Now's the time to get rid of that, and don't wait till I've polished it to glass. While in the process of checking each fret for smoothness, I noticed that some of the frets had a very slight sharp edge along the end of the rounded edge. Think of a bus top roof where it meets the sides. There was a little bit of a sharp edge there, so I took my fret file and I removed that little bit of sharpness from each of the frets. Time to smooth and polish the frets. I'm starting here with a 4-0 steel wool. A lot of folks will use this actually even as a final pass because this will make the frets nice and smooth. You won't really feel any roughness to it, but it doesn't quite get it glassy smooth. So I start with this 4-0 steel wool after using the very fine sanding block. I'll use a 4-0 steel wool, and this really removes any other chatter marks that you would have. Once I am done with the steel wool, I use a very fine plastic wool that is good for cleaning up any dirt on the fingerboard without removing any wood. Now it's time to start really polishing up these frets. Pull out my little box of various grit sandpapers, starting with a 400 grit, going to an 800, a 1200, a 2000 grit, and finally finishing with polishing with a Dremel with a wool pad and some car polishing compound. At this point in the process, I'm looking to see if I can spot any very tiny scratches on any of the frets, caused by obviously the filing process and even the sanding process. Even steel wool will leave very fine scratches that you won't feel, but if you look very carefully, you can see them. So I'm trying to remove anything like that from the top of each fret. I really do want to get them to a glassy, smooth finish. Here I'm applying just a little bit of the very fine car polish, rubbing polish to the top of each fret. And once that's done, I'll get the Dremel. You can see the Dremel is the blue thing there with the little wool round pad on it. I'll get that going and I'll polish each fret to really till it looks like glass. It'll just be completely shiny. Next up, I use a little bit of naphtha on a nice clean rag to remove any dust, dirt, residue left from either the polish or even just dust and dirt from the process of doing all the filing and cleaning of the fingerboard. You can see that it comes up pretty black, so it's cleaning off anything that's left on the fingerboard at this point. Next up, I like to use some Old English dark scratch cover. It does a nice job of making the fingerboard nice and even looking and brings out the richness of the wood without doing any damage. It's essentially just mineral oil with a little bit of stain in it. And I wipe practically all of it off when I'm done, but some of it is left on there just a tiny bit to keep the fingerboard from cracking in the future. The Dremel buffing pad removes a lot of tarnish and corrosion, as you can see from the blackness on it. So I like to, when I'm all done, put a fresh pad on there and just run over the frets one last time to give them a nice polish. Now the frets are all nice and clean, smooth, level, and feeling wonderful. It's time to put this guitar back together.